Joining us tonight, Liberal Senator Concetta Fierravanti-Wells, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Social Services, Jackie Kelly, former Howard Government Minister, Cassandra Goldie is the CEO of the Australian Council of Social Service, and Labor Senator Doug Cameron, the Shadow Minister for Human Services. Welcome to you all. Before we get into Ebola and other issues as well, Jackie Kelly, I want to start by making clear to everyone what's happened today for you. You have quit the Liberal Party. Why?
There has been a reform process underway within the Liberal Party, or a push for reform, for the last 5 years. It has continuously been stalled, and I was under the understanding by the end of September these reforms would be acted on. And
this is to give the grassroots members more...
A plebiscite, a greater say, not just in lower house pre-selections but upper house as well, to bring our constitution in New South Wales in line with Victoria or Queensland or Adelaide or any other jurisdiction in Australia. What has happened under the current system is that I think lobbyists have just started employing key Liberal personnel, and the whole system has become very entrenched. I think this affects pre-selections. It affects our response to poor behaviour, not only by elected officials, but also by grassroots members, and we're seeing that in ICAC.
And is what you've seen in ICAC contributed to your decision?
Yes, I think a key thing that we can do is reform the party, and then overnight the movement is, oh, well, let's reform the electoral laws. But if you've got this system in place for 5 years, the grassroots have pushed for reform. Howard has presented you with a report about how it can be done and what needs to be done to reform the party. And, oh, well, we'll wait till after the next election to do it. But in the meantime, we can improve electoral laws to make sure it doesn't happen again. I mean, that just seems... We're an organisation charged with changing a variety of laws. Surely our own constitution should be subject to rolling change and continuous improvement.
You've said in your letter to the Liberal Party today that the factions have developed into untalented groups which exist solely to promote their loyalists. And in fact, I think you're quoting from a report.
I am. Actually, that is actually a quote from the report.
What about that? Did you hear that?
Read on it. I think that quote from the report goes
and you say private slush funds pay for positions of influence in the party. Jackie Kelly, you're a former minister. You were the poster child of the Howard government, winning that Western Sydney seat of Lindsay. This is quite a big moment.
It is. I did not do it lightly. I did not. I really struggled with it. I mean, at the end of September came, and I sat down with the proponents of reform and just said, and now I will be patient, after the next election. I'm thinking, well, and then I talked to people right across the party and in other states. So I, really sat on that for 2 weeks, and then thought, you know what? Nothing is going to change if the people aren't prepared with a name that the Liberal Party has endorsed you with, prepared to say something's wrong. You can't have 8 or 9 people in front of ICAC and say nothing's wrong with your organisation. It's just not credible.
Doug Cameron, there are plenty of voices too in Labor who want further reform. We heard your colleague John Faulkner only a week or two ago again arguing the case to on a slightly different issue, water down union influence even further within the Labor Party. Do you accept that this is an issue for both sides?
Well, it's an issue for both parties, but I'm extremely pleased that Jackie has come out and said basically there are big problems in the Liberal Party and fingered corruption in the Liberal Party. And I happen to read I happen to read the letter that Jackie said, and this is the interesting thing for me. It says many grassroots members believe that the state executive has, at best, turned a blind eye and at worst been complicit. And this is about the party donations. This is about breaches of the law. Well, Jackie, if you've got any evidence of that, get down to ICAC and tell them about it.
Well, this is...
Because I can't accept...
I
can't accept the position that the Prime Minister has adopted, that it wasn't really a problem of corruption, it was just really bad laws. This is a breach of the legal position in New South Wales, and if your state executive have been complicit in it, it should be dealt with.
Look, I think there's a belief there I mean, at worst, they ignored it or did nothing or didn't discipline it or might have been vaguely aware of it and not investigate it.
But you're not actually alleging any direct involvement by the state executive?
I wouldn't know, because I had my turn on the merry-go-round and I got off. But when you're looking at what's trunching through ICAC and the party didn't know about it, I mean, hang on a minute, you've got state executive, clearly you must be aware, or just ignoring, or what for a strong
or complicit.
for a strong organisation. For a strong organisation, if you discipline your members and by leadership you show them how to behave by example, then you're not going to end up in ICAC. You can't, because the organisation has a culture where honesty is expected, sticking not just this side of the law, but this far from the line, especially in our business. So I call it the four corners test. If you want to be on four corners of the nation, how is it going to look? Your behaviour should be able to withstand that scrutiny. That's a standard given to any politician.
And you don't think it can at the moment?
Well, I think that there were a lot of vested interests. I think there's a lot of people that if there's no whistleblowing going on, there's no one to whistleblow to. There's no confidence in state executive. I think you have people having their own private slush fund because there's no confidence that the state executive will properly fund your campaign. Why else would you need a slush fund? There's no belief and confidence in the very organisation that's running your party. I mean, that says we need reform.
Just before we move on from all of this, Senator, how bad a reflection is it on the party that someone of the likes of Jackie Kelly has walked away because of all of this?
Look, I think we need to be clear that if there have been breaches of the law, then those people who have breached the law should pay a price for that. And I think the Prime Minister has made that very, very clear, and he's made that very, very clear in recent times. Yes.
But is there also a need for the party to show that it is seriously dealing with all of this and has the integrity that members want to see?
Look, has a culture in which it won't occur because people won't go that far of the line. At the moment, it seems like 10 people, there's almost a culture. And I think you really need a state executive that is listening from the floor at State Council. You need a state executive that has no vested interest whatsoever in any pre-selection. It has no vested interest in any member winning or not winning. It has no vested interest in it. Their job is there to lead the party, to organise the constitution and to discipline members.
But when the Prime Minister is saying it's not a problem of corruption, it's a problem of bad laws, that's not leadership, and that's not dealing with this issue effectively. And that is a bad position.
That is precisely what the Prime Minister has said. I think that you need to go back and have a look at. Well, that's not my understanding.
My understanding is the Prime Minister's actually set up the Howard Review, but somehow it's stalled. And the thing is, the Howard Review has proposed something very similar to Victoria, to Queensland. Now, we don't have these electoral laws in Victoria and Queensland. It's only in New South Wales. Hang on a minute. The party structure in those states keep this under control, but in New South Wales it doesn't. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that don't add up. My belief is that we desperately need reform. We've needed it for 5 years, and we need it before the next election.
Ebola. Jackie Kelly, how worried are you about this, about the potential for an outbreak reaching Australia?
Well, when it reached 1,000, I was sort of thinking, wow, there isn't much in our media about it. I thought 1,000, from Ebola sounded a lot. Got to 3,000, and now it's 4.5. We lost 3,000 in the World Trade Center. And our response to that, in terms of our commitment in Afghanistan, that ran to billions. Yeah. So, when you talk about threat, a global threat, good call.
The thing is, we do have obviously a very different standard of medical care in Australia to West Africa, and the procedures in place in hospitals, all that are great. But what we've seen in the United States, Cass, is a concern, isn't it? A patient there, the health workers who treated him, 2 of them now infected.
But I think that, once again, the public, those that are not have the deep expertise in this area of what is the required response, have an instinctive understanding that it is a big mistake for us to turn in on ourselves, to think that if we will be safe if we, because there's an ocean.
Shut the doors.
I mean, we live in a very globalised world. You know, the public in Australia well understands that we are deeply connected. So we want to see a proper, responsible approach to this from the government. I think we want to have a sense that we are absolutely doing our fair share. I mean, we've had Credit Suisse out today saying that in terms of the resources available to the nation, we're, you know, the wealthiest country in the world. So I think it will reflect very badly on Australia if we are not both actually and seen to be at the table, working out the technical issues that may be associated with us sending the right response.
Well, this is the thing. We're providing money.
I'd provide money and more money, but no troops on the ground.
You wouldn't put troops on the ground? Well, we're providing money, right? But the World Health Organisation, other aid agencies are saying that's great, they welcome it. What they really want is expertise, is actual people who know how to help stop this at its source in West Africa. You think it's too risky to do?
We would be sending defence personnel.
Well, defence personnel to do some of the logistics and infrastructure, like building hospitals and that sort of thing. But what about medical staff to actually help those?
Again, they would be defence personnel, they'd be reservists. Do we have the expertise? I mean, surely we don't even have.
Well, according to the AMA, we do. We have infectious diseases experts here.
But we don't run a plague type programs like they do in the States. I mean, the States have a much more advanced germ warfare capability than we would even look at. I mean, so does England, so does Russia. So
you don't think we have capacity to make much of a difference?
I don't think we have the capacity to send defence personnel and then leave them there. I mean, if they contract Ebola, what are we going to do?
And that's the question, Doug Cameron, isn't it? What are we going to do?
I think there's a more...
As a defence member, I want to be coming home. And I want to be brought home, and I want to be guaranteed I'm coming home.
Well, there's 4,000 US defence personnel in there now. There's 750 UK personnel. I'm sure that neither...
But they're going to have ships sitting off the coast there that can take them and...
And they have a massive germ warfare capability.
If we were serious, we would be having the discussions with the US now, because the US have said we need practical help. The UN has said we need practical help. The WHO, the World Health Organisation, is saying we need practical help.
But Foreign Affairs has been doing that. It's been talking to the Americans.
Well, they're not doing it well enough. We need an intervention by the Prime Minister. We need to make sure that our allies support our people on the ground. We've got, I think, 30 Australians on the ground now. What about them? Do you just forget about them? So my view is we should play our part. This is an international emergency. It's got huge implications for West Africa. It's got huge implications everywhere else. We should do more. We're not doing enough. And if we are not, we don't have the capacity or the capability to convince our key allies to look after our troops and look after our people, then that's a failure of leadership.
Do you think it would make a difference if the Prime Minister picked up the phone to convince the Americans or the British to help out?
There are a number of issues here, and I'm not sure if any of you heard Peter Dutton this afternoon in terms of some of the key points that he made. One, we are not going to put our personnel in harm's way unless we are 100% assured that they are going to be supported. And it's all very well for the Labor Party to pretend that we can send plane loads full of health workers over there. Where's the evacuation plan? Where is the assurance that these people will be looked after? And this has traditionally been...
And if you're not
let's just get an answer on that.
The government is taking advice from the Chief Medical Officer, the Chief of the Defence Force, the Department of Agriculture, the National Security Committee, and this is what Minister Dutton said this afternoon. But more importantly, this has always been a bipartisan issue. This is the sort of thing that should be bipartisan. And I have to say that some of the comments that we've heard today from Tanya Plibersek and Catherine King have not been very, very helpful in this situation. Now, Minister Dutton has indicated that we are having discussions, but I think he's made it very, very clear as to the issues and the problems that we are facing.
But is he having discussions, or is the PM having discussions? Do you think that would make a difference if there was ministerial or prime ministerial
I think Minister Dutton did indicate that he's also having discussions with the World Health Organisation and looking at some of their needs. I mean, they've welcomed, and let's not forget that they've been very welcoming of the assistance that we've wanted to give.
And that's great.
But I think that there are other things that we can potentially do, and these were some of the things that Minister Dutton canvassed.
We've got US troops stationed in Australia.
Yeah, but they don't have Ebola. That's the thing.
But
flip this around. Would you be willing to have in Australia?
There can be a position where they are seriously injured. And
it's different than having an infectious, deadly disease.
They can bring them home. We bring them home.
Would you expect Australia to say no?
We bring our seriously injured.
That's what I was going to ask you. It's one thing to help out an American soldier who's got a broken leg or a heart attack. Great. If they have Ebola, would you be willing to take non-citizens into Australia?
Of course you would have to. This is an international issue. This is about humanity. This is about trying to solve this problem. And we just cannot say we're going to be parochial about this. We're not going to engage as the WHO has asked, as the UN has asked, as the US has asked, and we just say we're not going to do it. We're not going to have Ebola in Australia.
So we're not bringing our defence people back?
You will bring your defence people back, but you'll take the precautions while they're there.
I think I think it would be fair to say there is a perception at the moment that, on the one hand, the way that the government has absolutely led and been seen to lead engagement over the Russian and Ukraine situation, and the way in which, for example, the Foreign Minister absolutely rolled up her sleeves in the working of the UN Security Council in saying we're a small country, but we are prepared to invest a lot of our engagement in order to get the right result. I think we would want to see an equal kind of engagement. Well, we have a lot of people dead in Africa.
We don't need more. Yes, but we don't need more Australians.
But Jackie, I think it is clearly not just a question of time that we will start to have more and more incidents of people coming into Australia in a range of different ways, and we will have a breakout here more and more. And this is the UN's voice is very clear in saying we have a window of opportunity here to really try and contain this, so that we don't end up with needing
Jackie
that
Kelly,
kind
as
of
a
crisis
defence member, what do you think of the German government is asking for defence volunteers to go? Would that make a difference?
The thing is that you need the, that's right, you need the expertise, and I think people who have taken the Hippocratic Oath obviously are more likely volunteers, but absolutely sending
as you point out, the doctors and nurses who are reservists.
Yeah. I have no problem with that. If they're volunteering and they're understanding that potentially this is a one-way ticket. You know, and I think you have to understand that, because if you contract the disease, we're going to keep it within the confines of where it is. If you have Ebola, you might be like the nurse who caught a plane back, and now we're searching for the entire plane load of people that travelled with her. I mean, it starts to get a bit like Typhoid Mary. It's avian flu all over again.
So we'll just hide away.
No, we won't hide all away, but we will not sacrifice defence lives to achieve nothing but Ebola in Australia.
To achieve nothing. It's just nonsensical.
How many defence lives are you prepared to sacrifice on this?
It's not a question. That's a stupid position.
Well, no, it's not.
The US are putting troops in. The UK's putting troops in.
They have massive amounts of germ warfare capability.
And they will share it with us. The Prime Minister picks the phone up.
Are they? They're probably using it all for their own military.
Well, you don't
Having some piggybacking on.
See, the problem for the Americans, Doug Cameron, and for Obama, even if Tony Abbott called him directly, if he says, yes, we'll take Australian citizens who've got Ebola, he then has to say that also to all their best friends, whether it's the Japanese, whether it's the British. They'd have to open the door to a lot of non-citizens.
But the US can't ask for our help by putting people on the ground and say that we are not going to give you support if someone contracts Ebola. It can't happen.
Just to tease that out, are you saying the role of American troops that are in the Northern Territory should be conditional on quid pro quo.
I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that there is a position where American troops are welcomed here. There's an alliance between the two countries. The US president is saying, can you send troops, can you send medical facilities to West Africa? If we say yes, my view is there's an obligation on America to assist our people when they're there. I think it's clear.
The threat here, Dougie, is Ebola in Australia. That's the threat.
But if you don't do anything about it, that'd be a bigger threat.
Yes, but I think you need sending defence people over there and bringing them back. You know.
All right, we've got to take a break. We've got to take a break. And then after that, something that's probably going to be just as divisive. The PM this week said, coal is good for humanity. Is it? Stay with us. Good to have you with us tonight. We're going to shift topic from Ebola, which we've spent most of the ad break talking about, you'll be surprised to hear, to coal. The Prime Minister this week visited, he opened a coal mine in central Queensland. This year we've seen coal prices fall, we've seen China slap some tariffs on, a lot of pessimism about the future of coal. Tony Abbott, though, said coal has a bright future. It's good for the world, it's good for humanity. Doug Cameron, is it?
Well, as a former coal-fired power station worker, I brought my kids up off the back of coal. But I think it's clear that unless some of the technology like carbon capture and storage comes into place, then the future for coal will be a diminished future. I think
but people have been saying that about carbon capture and storage for years.
Yeah, but you've just got to look at China. You've got to look at those cities and see what's happening. You've got to see why China's now putting tariffs on our coal. This is a huge issue. The best way to deal with this is to get some common sense in the coalition and get a price on carbon, be part of the overall world approach to try and
speed up the decline
deal with
of coal.
this. Well, if there is a decline in coal, you've got to have something else. I mean, the coalition have got no compunction about getting rid of the car industry. They've got no compunction about getting rid of our defence industry.
But what do you replace it with?
Well, look, all the experts say, and I know in Scotland, that they've actually ran the country on renewables. And more countries are doing this.
So there's a need.
It's pretty expensive, but you've got to make the call. Is it the expense of the power, or is it the future of the environment?
So just to be clear,
I think you've got to get a balance.
I'll come back to nuclear as well, but your ideal would be phase out coal altogether.
No, I don't say that. I say you've got to look for the technological fixes, and I think carbon capture and storage can be one of them. I think if the coal industry was smart, they'd be looking at how they can do that. They'd be putting more money into that.
We've been putting hundreds of millions into this.
No, we haven't.
For a long time.
No, we haven't.
Didn't Kevin Rudd put $1 billion into it?
No, they put $1 billion in, and that was cut back, and it was cut back. They've got power plants.
So who's going to put the money in if Labor cut it back?
Well, I reckon industry and government has to do it. There's no other option. You've got to reduce CO2 emissions. That's what the scientists tell us. And all these lunatics in the Liberal Party that tell us that there's not a problem.
But it just seems to be putting a lot of faith into a technology that hasn't really worked.
If you make coal uncompetitive, the only real option is nuclear, Dougie. And where do you stand on nuclear?
Yes, who's asking
I'll ask you that.
Well, you'll ask me that.
I was going to come back to that. Let's cut to the chase.
I think we don't have either the technology for nuclear in this country. Even if we decided today that we would go nuclear, it would probably take 3 to 4 decades to do it. Then you're left with the clean-up costs after nuclear. Nuclear is not a clean energy source. It's got huge problems that still need to be dealt with.
But it's, OK, you're saying carbon capture and storage. Nuclear is well and truly tested in many countries.
I'm not saying, can I say, I'm not only saying carbon capture and storage. The International Energy Authority says carbon capture and storage.
But it's still not approved. It's not actually used for baseload power.
Denmark runs on new renewables, and at peak times hauls off Sweden's coal-fired power stations and nuclear.
I'm not saying, but I'm not arguing.
Renewables can't sustain you through peak periods.
I'm not arguing you can suddenly turn off coal power. You can't do it. But what you have to do is work towards renewable. You have to work towards getting rid of the CO2 in the atmosphere. Otherwise, my grandkids haven't got a great future in terms of their environment.
Senator.
But of course, you know, the Labor Party's response is to bring back the carbon tax, and that's precisely
a price on carbon, absolutely.
Julia, you're allowed to say carbon tax and carbon price. It's the same thing. So that's your
your subsidise the polluters. That's what you're going to do.
To it is to bring back the carbon tax. I would have thought that after the last federal election, Doug, you would realise that
what is the future for coal that you see?
Look, I think the Prime Minister was very optimistic about the future for coal, and I think he should be optimistic about the future for coal in Australia and in the world. It is still the best base load, and I think he has every right to be optimistic.
Even though the Chinese seem to be doing their utmost to slow down imports from Australia?
I think one also has to look at the context of that in the current negotiations.
This is a negotiating chip in.
Well, I just think so we'll get a tariff because of your
no,
I'm just
thinking that at the moment there are negotiations in relation to a free trade agreement.
And you reckon this is a strategic bargaining chip move?
Suffice to say that there are issues in relation to trade between Australia and China, and I'm confident that those issues will be resolved.
Diplomatic.
What are those issues? What are those issues then? That you're saying the Chinese are taking a strategic position to impose a tariff on our
I'm just saying that at the moment we're in negotiations with a free trade agreement with China. I mean, it did start, I would remind you, Doug, during the Howard years, and whilst your lot were in government, you just sat on your hands on this issue, so we've picked up the ball.
But do you reckon the Chinese have done this now to screw us on a better deal?
All I'm just saying, David, is that there are a number of issues on the table in relation to the free trade agreement, which Andrew Robb is negotiating, and he's doing good work. And
this has made it a little bit harder.
Well, let's just wait and see what happens.
We'll get another free trade deal. That's all.
What do you see as the future of coal?
Well, I do want to bring the perspective to this discussion about the price on carbon and where we got with our efforts as a country to tackle climate change, because the stakes in this area are incredibly high. We are absolutely clear that we need to be pulling a whole range of levers for us to be able to transition out of the reliance that we have on carbon and coal, and to be doing whatever we can, balancing the pain of a transition, and there is pain that sometimes has to be had for us to get where we need to be. We were very supportive of us doing the hard work in getting bipartisan consensus on putting a price on carbon. I do urge us
Didn't last long, did it?
We haven't got it right now, but I urge the major parties to invest the time. It might not be on shows like this one, David, tonight, but I do urge them and those backbenchers, all those in the party rooms that know that we have to have a long-term action on climate change, that this will be a part of the work. Do we today, are we able to fully rely on renewables? No, but it's 2014. We have examples of where there is significant gains that have been taken out of renewables. That story is a success story, Jackie, right now in 2014. And where would we be, where will we be in another decade if we continue to invest in that industry to get the efficiencies, to get the jobs created, to really get the public behind it, how we get to households being able to generate their own energy more and more, and to make sure that there is equity built into that work. We've got a number of levers here.
And some institutions are really trying to encourage that along.
We should be looking to the long term on coal doesn't send the right signal to us
Your
about where we're
constituency was
trying to
most
go.
hit hard by carbon tax. You know,
Jackie,
that was all passed on to the consumer.
not.
It was.
Jackie,
The people in Western Sydney, the major complaint they had was electricity bills, and they went up 30%.
And we know, and we know that a significant part of the driving up.
To help them.
Now, I want to talk about what the ANU's done, because it's got a lot of flack. It's not the only institution, but a lot of focus on its decision to divest about $16 million in assets in some 7 fossil fuel companies, including the gas company Santos. Now, gas is cleaner than coal. They've kept assets in BHP, for example, and yet divested Santos. And they've called them socially and environmentally irresponsible. The PM called that decision this week stupid. We've seen other super funds head down this path here and around the world as well. It does seem to be a movement that's gathering some momentum. But, Doug Cameron, does it make sense to get rid of a gas stock but keep coal stocks? Well,
look, I don't dabble in the stock market, but I must say that it's really a matter for the ANU. They've got to make that decision. They've got to justify that decision. That's entirely up to them. These decisions go on all the time, but what this does show is that there is a growing concern about carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and the implications for that. The scientists have been consistent that this is a problem, has to be dealt with.
The point I'm making, though, isn't gas part of the answer right now?
Well, it may be part of the transition. But I think the gas industry in this country has botched it up.
Why punish them by calling them socially and environmentally irresponsible?
You have to, don't ask me.
No,
don't ask me. But I think the gas industry have botched their investment up so badly that they've allowed themselves to be marginalised, and certainly in New South Wales. It's not just, it's not just the Greenies. It's the Liberal Party in New South Wales that won't touch coal and gas.
But what is this something that any government, indeed any Prime Minister, should be commenting on, the way institutions invest?
Well, as an alumni of ANU, I thought the decision was pretty stupid as well.
There's a surprise.
But there aren't too many Liberals that came out of the ANU, I have to say. But the point is that I think that all this decision has done is deprive members of the ANU with profitable and shares in profitable investments for the future. I really don't think that...
I'm sure they've found some other companies to put the money into that are to be profitable, but...
I don't think it was a very...
Look, ethical investing is becoming more and more the thing, and you'll find a lot of floats are now promoting themselves to ethical investors. It's becoming a very significant part of the whole, share market, and a lot of companies like to tout that. I think the silly thing is universities commenting on government policy and governments commenting on universities. I just think... the amount of election campaigns I went to arguing with universities. University is the place that people go to on their way to get to where they want to be. I think universities...
If they can afford it under you.
Universities take it upon themselves to have all the social commentary, and that's come from a place where they are. I think by and large most governments just ignore it and then just run their own policy agenda. Universities that are well run can spot where the agenda's going and tailor themselves accordingly.
So you don't have too much criticism of what the ANU has done?
The University of Western Sydney, and I'm a member of the college out there, they're supporting Badgerys Creek. They take positions.
I think you also have to look at some of the people that were behind some of the decisions and their connections, particularly to the Greens. I think that's been very, very clear. But it was pretty obvious today for anybody who read the Australian Financial Review that there was a little mud map there that showed the connections to the Green Party.
Our first conversation in a way, but look, as I understand it, what we're talking about here is a university that has an investment fund. They have exercised the fund managers have performed their duties. It is very common for there should be, and in fact the market analysts say it's very hard now to unpick the difference between the forces on the market of ethical decision-making around investment and the risk assessment into the future because of the views around where these industries are likely to go, so it's almost like they're bound up together. Now, I think when it comes to your investment strategy, I think it's a very hands-off. I think, the ANU's made a call. We'll see what happens with other, this is the market.
It's another idea from university.
This is the
universities are full of good ideas.
This is the market at work, and that is one part of the university. I must say, Jackie, I'm a bit concerned if what I've taken from your contributions, you don't think it's appropriate for universities to be involved in social debate and public policy.
They always are. It makes no difference.
I think we should be cheering the fact that we have our young researchers and our research community Andy, absolutely buying in on
Defending
economic,
science.
social and environmental policy,
will.
more
I think
power to them as part of civil society
We've got to get another break in. We've still got to get to shirt fronting. We're not going to leave that out. And also the industry statement that came from the government this week. Stay with us. You're watching The Nation. We are talking tonight to Senator Conchita Fierravanti-Wells, Jackie Kelly, we have Cassandra Goldie and Labor Senator Doug Cameron. Shirt fronting. Now, the PM's copped a lot of flack this week for saying that if Vladimir Putin comes to the G20 in Brisbane, he'll shirt front him over the MH17 issue. No doubt Australians are pretty angry, upset, distressed about Russia's behaviour, not only in potentially arming the rebels who shot down MH17, but then, you know, in not allowing proper access to the site or helping provide access to the site when 38 Australians were killed and their bodies were left for days, and some, sadly, may still be there, 2 of them that have not been identified. But, on the other hand, the G20 is an important institution. We can't stop a leader coming. It's a consensus organisation and an important organisation and all of that. Was the language, Cass Goldie, you first on this, was the language from Tony Abbott on the money? Was it appropriate or was it too hairy-chested? What did you think?
Well, I think that the metaphor used is the wrong one. For me, because on the in terms of a domestic audience, what we see are 2 men literally using physical force to sort out what is a very serious global issue.
Is that the way you took what he said? I mean, and I know a lot of people did. But the way I took it was he wants to have a firm, rough conversation with him. But I didn't take it physical.
That's the imagery that gets created out of this. I think quite clearly people expect to see the Prime Minister taking a very firm position. And I think we will see that. But I think, you know, from our point of view, there was a sense of, I guess, the machoism associated with that at a time when I think we want to be very clearly looking somebody in the eye and being very clear that this is a serious issue and that this isn't about going out, you know, and kind of sorting it out in the...
Is that the way you read it?
So you know, I don't want to make too much of it. I think in the end, the G20 meeting is a very important engagement.
Yep.
And, you know, maybe the story will have had its run by the end of tonight.
Jackie Kelly, was it the right language, do you think?
Yeah, loved it. You know, look, you've got 38 Australians dead. You've got a whole bunch of Russians not in their uniform running around with Russian weapons. Somebody needs an explanation, and Abbott said, I'm going to get shirt to shirt with you in your face and say, there's a Geneva Convention on this. You know, you don't target unarmed civilians. You know, we need to get your cooperation in getting our people back. You are going against 50 years of international law on this. You're wrong. And I don't care if you're 10 times bigger than us, you're wrong. And someone needs to call you on it. I don't have a problem with that.
The thing is, Labor, perhaps didn't goad the Prime Minister into saying this, but have been pretty strong in saying he shouldn't come, he's not welcome, where, you know, Bill Shorten said, I'm not going to meet with him, wouldn't give him the time of day.
Well, Bill Shorten's been very strong on it, and I think part of the issue for the Prime Minister is that he wanted to be stronger. And, you know, look, I think the big issue here is the 38 families and the friends of the deceased, and that's the issue. And what Jackie's saying is that you want to get, you know, face-to-face to talk about the issues. All this has done is to make sure that won't happen.
So I think you don't think he's going to come?
Oh, he'll come, but he won't talk. I think that's been, you know, that's been clearly the Russians' position.
I don't think he can come and not talk.
Well, he certainly can, because, you know, Tony Abbott can't force...
You've got to get in your Hawaiian shirt and do the group photo. I mean, there's plenty of opportunities to talk.
I just think that it was a bit counterproductive. It wasn't a real mature position. And I've got to tell you, if a building worker said to their boss, after the break, I'm going to shirt front you, they'd be before the
but you're not talking,
ABC.
If a policeman told the murderer, I'm going to shoot from you.
You're talking about the Prime Minister talking to the media about a foreign leader. I mean,
but I don't think
really
this
take that
macho, violent, I'm a tough guy approach. If it's about some, if they've had a focus group somewhere that says you've got to be tough, well, that's what he's done. But I don't think it's been really constructive.
Everyone knew what
I
Tony
don't think
meant.
it will deliver what was meant to be delivered, and that is a chance to deal with this issue in a strong way with Putin. I don't think it's going to happen now.
Look, I think the Australian public do understand what the Prime Minister's saying here. He's going to have a very strong and very robust conversation with President Putin. I mean, President Putin is coming to Australia. We're hosting the G20, so it's understandable that there will be a conversation between the two leaders. And as Jackie said, I mean, we have 38 Australians that were murdered by Russian-backed rebels holding Russian weapons, and so in the current circumstances and given what's happened after the aeroplane came down, I think it's important that we do have as best cooperation as we can from the Russian government, and it's very clear from everything that's happened that hasn't been forthcoming. So I think the Prime Minister's sentiment is really reflecting, I think, the general feeling that the Australian public feel very, very angry about this.
But is it more important to actually, just to Doug Cameron's point, is it more important to actually secure a meeting with Vladimir Putin than to make the Australian public feel good?
Well, I think it's important that the Russian president do understand the extent of this anger, and that this anger is still very much to the forefront of the feelings of the Australian public.
Do you think their ambassador's incompetent, that's not going back?
The thing is, Tony Abbott's already spoken to Vladimir Putin in the time after the actual incident. He spoke to him on the phone and as far as I understand, made it pretty clear that Australia was pretty angry about all of this. So, yes...
I don't think he's unaware. I mean, I'm pretty sure after the international furore over that comment, Putin's well aware that Australians are not happy. Well, obviously the ambassador didn't even know that. I mean, they haven't communicated to government whether he's coming or not. So how can you organise a meeting with a guy you don't even know is coming? So I think the ambassador is incompetent, but that's just my view. I think, yes, I think he should come. I don't see why he wouldn't. He's one of the biggest, one of the big economies.
We know he likes to, strut the world stage and all that. A couple of other issues that we've got time for. The industry policy this week, a lot of sensible stuff we've heard from previous governments. One idea that does stand out is this PTEC idea, where you give a company the ability to help a school in a high unemployment area. The first trial is going to be Geelong, actually, and it can actually help set the curriculum for the senior high school students and mentor them. When they leave school, they have either an associate diploma or something, an entry-level position for a job. Good idea, Doug Cameron?
Look, I don't think so. I think Australians need broad-based skills. They need to be trained on a broad base of issues, not narrowly in terms of what IBM or McDonald's or someone else wants. I've always argued a broad-based skill. If you've got a broad-based skill, you can take those skills anywhere. I've got a trade certificate, that's why I'm here.
I think it's worked very well in Western Sydney. We've got sports high schools, we've got performing arts schools, we've got selective high schools.
But you don't have an individual company in there doing a course.
But you have to fund these concepts from somewhere, and it's a trial up. You might find that you end up going to, a selective based and don't think you don't, because a lot of the sporting companies do get involved with a few of those sports high schools. On top of that, you've also got the apprenticeship training programs, and a lot of the companies are involved in schools which are taking on.
So worth a try.
It is worth a try.
Cass,
look, I think there's a couple of parts to it. One is I do think it would become potentially very high risk if what we end up doing is relying on to deliver a fundamental education system through corporatised arrangements. I mean, I think that is a direction we certainly don't want to go in. I do think that there is a very important role for local employers and local corporations to have a relationship with schools, particularly in the sort of transition of young people who are trying to make those key decisions about when do I leave, what's my future going to look like. I think those career decision-making processes, we need those local employers there. to give those young people a strong sense of where they could go, and so they can make good decisions about what
now
their
having to put into the curriculum. Manners, workplace manners, are now going to be taught in New South Wales schools. Why? Because employers are saying Generation Y doesn't give a toss.
That's what I mean.
They turn up to work.
That's what I mean about
the services garbage.
The community around the school.
I'm talking about the employer coming into the education process and saying, at the end of this education is a job. If I can't employ them, you've done something wrong. But let me tell you what I need.
What do you do in Geelong?
And some people can come.
If there's no car industry, if there's no shipbuilding industry that people can go to in Melbourne, if there's no manufacturing industry, if you just destroy the manufacturing sector as the coalition has done, I think it's crazy. All this stuff is just so much flim-flam.
Well, I think, we're out of time, unfortunately. That's a whole other debate. We haven't had time to get to poverty either, unfortunately, Cass Goldie.
It's not gone away
No,
yet,
it's not gone away. And you had some disturbing figures this week. Anyway, thank you all very much for taking part tonight. Thanks for your company as well. See you same time next week. Bye for now.